Good morning, fellow romanticists. I hope you are enjoying William Blake as much as I am. I'd like to pose a question. Can we utilize Blake's Europe of Prophecy for our gain in 2021, or is it outdated now, over 200 years later? I think we can. I notice that this poem by Blake does not profess to the reader what they should think, but rather how they should think. For example, Blake wrote, Thought changed the infinite to a serpent, and man fled from its face and hid. What is the infinite? Well, Blake was concerned with human spirituality and was critical of institutionalized religion working with governments. This poem, occurring just after the end of the Enlightenment period, is significant. Blake is critical of the ways in which the Enlightenment period had negatively altered human spirituality or the infinite. So his aversion to the deist notion that reason is the only source of divine knowledge led to his abandoning organized religion. In another of his poems, There is no natural religion, he claims, quote, reason, or the ratio of all we have already known, is not the same that it shall be when we know more, unquote. Blake was a strong believer that our spirits are capable of receiving inspiration, a second source of divine knowledge, and his search for this knowledge never ceased. This rejection of Enlightenment thinking, valuing reason over affect, distinguishes the Romantic movement, of which Blake was an influential part. Referring to the human mind, the line, once open to the heavens and elevated on the human neck, now overgrown with hair and covered with a stony roof, reflects the lack of imagination Blake saw in the newly enlightened society. He was concerned about the restrictive force that the church and state exacted against free thought. He observed that people who were once open to the heavens were now restrained from thinking freely. Thus, he uses the poem to criticize the ruling monarch and ministers in the lines, Above the rest the howl was heard from Westminster louder and louder. The guardian of the secret codes forsook his ancient mansion, driven out by the flames of org. These lines reference the proclamation by George III that sought to eliminate, quote, diverse, wicked, and seditious writings, unquote. David Erdman has said that historians agree with Blake that this proclamation began England's black era of reaction and coercion, prompting what Blake refers to as the howl through Europe. He goes on to describe the results in lines 1226 to 1231. Every house a den, every man bound, the shadows are filled with spectres, and the windows wove over with curses of iron. Over the doors, thou shalt not, and over the chimneys, fear is written. With bands of iron round their necks fastened into the walls, the citizens, in leaden gyves, the inhabitants of suburbs walk heavy. Soft and bent are the bones of villagers. Now, today there are commonalities to the period following the Enlightenment. As it was during the Enlightenment, scientific reasoning is now favored over spiritual inspiration. George III's use of censorship during Blake's time has also resurfaced in our day. This censorship is not based on religious blasphemy, but rather blasphemy against the new morality. Blake rejected the sexual repression of religious morality, which today's new morality is also in opposition to. However, Blake was also in opposition to censorship and thought control. He was opposed to any strict moral code. So how prevalent is censorship and thought control today? Well, a quick glance of headlines from any periodical reveals that we most certainly are being told what to think, and the trend of censoring opposing voices stifles reflection on how to think. Increasingly, individuals are relying on biased media outlets on both sides of the political spectrum to interpret the world we inhabit. Even here at the university, Blake's prophecy carries relevancy. What is often overlooked in academic discussions is the diminishing returns that result from Marxist theories. Critical theories are often portrayed as the last chapter in the book of theory, or at the very least, the foundation on which new theories emerge. The assumption that critical theories are without flaw is like putting what Blake calls a stony roof on the mind. Post-critique theory is still largely ignored, yet it offers an alternative to critical theories. The pessimism of critical theories is ultimately an interminable process of self-critique that reveals little by way of solutions. What other theories could still be discovered that don't rely on this pessimism? Blake used his poetry to imagine the possibilities inspired by the human spirit. He created a world that was critical to censorship and thought control by moral gatekeepers like the Church of England or the governing rulers. He promoted rebellion against these forces. It is important to ask, who are the moral gatekeepers and governing rulers today? Drawing insight from Blake, it is possible to imagine a more positive world that is sensitive to inspiration and not reliant on reason alone.